Welcome to Cooking with Cardboard. My name is Ben. Really excited to talk a little bit today about threat assessment. How you doing today, Martin?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. You can find us on Twitter at Cardboard Cooks, and you can find us on the YouTubes at Cooking with Cardboard. So, how's your week been?
It's been pretty well. Pretty good.
Yeah?
My niece just turned 1, so we got to throw her a party this weekend. It was a lot of fun. No magic was had, but it was a lot of fun.
Oh, good. I love birthday parties for little kids. They're always so excited about everything.
Yeah. Really well-behaved kid, though. All good.
Oh,
How was your week?
Awesome. No, it's very snowy. It's snowing very heavily right now as we record here in Tacoma.
Oh, my gosh.
So much snow. This is the third day it snowed in the last week. But we haven't been having a lot of it stick. It's been pretty easy to get around. A little bit of black ice here and there, but overall, it's just very unusual for Tacoma.
That's crazy. Well, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to be talking about threat assessment in Commander. So, threat assessment is a widely understood idea. I think most players kind of understand when they hear it what it means. You're talking about looking at a player and determining which of these three players is the most dangerous to that person. So everybody does it every game. People go, oh my goodness, you just played a Craterhoof Behemoth. You are the threat. Or you just went off. You are the threat. But I find often that people misassign threat because they don't really understand what each player is actually trying to do. So that's why we're going to have this talk today.
Gotcha. Yeah, that could be very useful. I think a lot of newer players will want to just cast their spells, especially when it comes to like interactive spells, and making sure that they're using that in the best way possible is really important. But
Absolutely.
it's not always intuitive.
Yeah, it really isn't. You know, I've been playing this game for years, and even on one-on-one Magic, you have to understand threat assessment. You have to understand which of the threats that your opponent's playing is the one that you want to spend your removal on. And you usually want to try and hang on to your removal to deal with their even better threats. So if they play an early threat that isn't that important, and you spend your removal, and then they play their bomb, you can get left out in the rain, so to speak.
Yeah, I will embarrass myself really early on. I think like the second or third time I played Magic, of course I started with a deck that has counter spells. I tried to counter somebody's like Rampant Growth or like Cultivate, and they were like, why are you doing that? I was like, I don't know, I just want to play it. Is that a bad idea? Like stuff like that. It's like, why are you doing that?
Yeah. I just want to play my cards, man.
Yeah, I don't know. Explain why not. You know?
Well, for those listening, the reason why that's not a good idea is that you will not stop that player's game plan. They're still going to be able to play lands and get to what they want to cast, but then that counterspell is gone forever. And so when they play their bomb that is going to make them win the game, like a Craterhoof on a full board, you'll be looking at that counterspell in your graveyard saying, oh, man, shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with exactly, we talked a little bit about what threat assessment is, but let's get a little more nitpicky about it. So, threat assessment is either the player or the card that is threatening to win the game or to stop you from winning the game. So, a threat could be something like the large pile of creatures with incoming Craterhoof Behemoth, which I think everybody can see, right? Everybody sees that and says, this is a problem. We know that. But it could also be the Phyrexian Altar that someone just played, knowing that it infinites with, a ham sandwich. So just that single combo piece could be something that is going to be threatening the board, and not everybody would identify that, especially newer players. So it could be the person or the card, but why it's so important, it really stems back to an article by Mike Flores from 1999 called Who is the Beatdown? And so 1999, yeah. So I think a lot of newer as in like the last decade of Commander players probably don't know it. It was a very famous article of some early Magic theory by a pro, Mike Flores, talking about who is the beatdown. And what that means is when you're sitting down to a one-on-one game of Magic, you're trying to figure out your role. So if you are the aggro player, you need to be playing your threats as fast as you can, trying to squeeze every point of damage, trying to press your advantage. While if you're the control player, you're trying to hold your resources back, only reply to the stuff that you absolutely have to, try and get some card advantage going, and then win with some over-the-top threat. And the reason why this is important is because you really learn a lot about the best use of your cards and timing of those cards. So if you see the first player who plays a threat and you just immediately remove it, you're really wanting to hold that threat for as long as you can if you're not the aggro deck. If you're the aggro deck where you're trying to win right away, you're going to want to spend that removal as soon as you can. That way you can keep pressing your advantage. Does that make sense?
Keeping the door open. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, it's a hard concept. It sounds easy, but it's hard when there's 4 or 3 other players at the table understanding that role, especially if you're not playing somebody that's like straightforward. Like Goblins, like is a really easy example where it's like they want to turn sideways and hit you. Like it's very there's not a lot of like different avenues to go about that, but I don't know.
Right.
And it's on the topic of like identifying the cards on the table. It's hard sometimes if you don't know all the cards because you see one player with like 20 cards and the other player, like you said, with the Phyrexian Altar only has 1. But sometimes that 1 card is more dangerous than the 20 little itty bitty creatures.
Right.
Can be challenging.
It's also important to know that you're thinking about your own deck. So you're not going to assess anybody's level of threat without keeping in mind who you are and what you're trying to do. So one of the things I always go back to is like my Henzi deck. Henzi's all about blitzing out large creatures that have ETB attacks and or death triggers. And a lot of the cards I have in there deal with enchantments and artifacts. So very rarely will I be worried about the enchantment player at the table because I know I can keep them in check so they don't snowball out of control. Eventually I'll get to my Bane of Progress or I'll get to the Druid of Purification and use those to try and clear up their board and keep them in check. Likewise, I'm also not super afraid of creature-based decks, but I am terrified about combo decks because there's not a lot of flash creatures to interact with combos.
Gotcha. Yeah, you're not really interacting on the stack there.
Exactly. Next up is going to be how to identify the threat. So, when do you think threat assessment starts, Ben?
Usually, unless you're playing that like other style where you play face down commanders, it usually starts at like Rule 0 when you sit down and you see the other people's commanders, because it can be very hard to convince me that like on Friday somebody tried to convince me that they had a fair Kinnan deck. They were like, it's Power Stone Kinnan, like it's jank, it's super fun. And this guy took like a 30-minute turn and then lost the game. And I was like, what are we doing here? But yes.
So Kinnan lost after a 30-minute turn?
He had KSI and sacked everything and then was like, what do I do with all this mana? And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, it sounds like you're passing the turn. Like, I don't know. But yes, threat assessment on the Rule 0, during Rule 0 about the commanders, if you have those typically CEDH commanders, that can be a really easy way to start the conversation of like, hey, that looks like a really scary commander. How did you build that? Like, should we all be playing like arch enemy from the start against your deck to make it a more fair game, or like how do you think that this is going to go? Because I think having a conversation about like and giving the person an opportunity to be like, yes, you should be afraid of me, even during the game, is really good, because I think I like to think I'm pretty honest when it comes to my threat on board. I think playing against you, Martin, you're very honest with like saying whether or not you're the issue currently, and giving players opportunities to kind of out themselves as the threat takes away some of the convincing you have to do. If you are going to try and convince the other players, hey, we need to be targeting him, opposed to just him being like, hey, you guys need to get rid of this or I'm going to win.
Right. So you bring up a really good point that threat is very much tied to politics. So if you're able to get everybody on board that one person is the threat, then everybody can use their resources in such a way that you're not losing too much of your resources to deal with the threat if everybody else is also contributing. But I actually want to say, you had mentioned when you're shuffling up and you know their commander, Because if they have Corvold or whatever, like you said, Kinnan,
Yes.
you know that that's likely going to be a problem commander. So it was very interesting. Earlier you had mentioned that threat assessment starts when you're shuffling up if you know the opponent's commander, like if they have a Kinnan or a Corvold. And I 100% agree with that. But you had mentioned, like, except if the commanders are face down. And I disagree with that. I think you can determine
Really?
threat assessment even if you don't know the opponent's commanders. So,
Okay, what are you going off there?
well, if you know the players at your table, you know who is a tryhard.
Oh, that's a good point.
You know what I mean? You know who's
Yeah.
very competitive, who likes to play strong decks, who has the most gameplay experience. I've won lots of Commander games just because I have more gameplay experience than my opponents. So that
That's
would
a
make
good
me
point.
more threatening sometimes. So I really think that's important to keep in mind.
You know, you can go one level deeper there. You can say, what does this guy's deck box look like? What is this guy? How is this guy carrying his decks to the table? Does he have one of those like Home Depot carriers? Like, I'm going to be more afraid of you if you have one of those. Honestly, I do the traditional backpack, just throwing deck boxes in there. I feel like that's
Yeah.
a little camo on my skill level, but
No, I think you're right. I think whatever information you can glean in Magic, especially if you're really trying to win,
Yeah.
is going to be, you want to find all of your information. And I was historically a more competitive player. I played at a lot of limited tournaments, and I used to try and grind money on MTGO, the Magic Online. You know, long before Arena, I was grinding for money doing that, selling the cards I drafted to keep the train going. So when you're looking at that, even the littlest thing, like having each land in your deck that's a basic have the same picture and art, so that someone doesn't, if you reveal a planes, they don't know, oh, that was a different planes than they had earlier, so now I know they have two planes in their hand. Little small things like that have such a small bearing on the game. In Commander, it's less important, but finding those little bit of competitive spikes, it helps out. What else do you think would be something that would happen during a Commander game that would give you information about threat assessment? Maybe after we shuffle up and we start playing the game.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go about that. I think easiest ways I usually go about it, because I'm not always the best player, is I usually look at how many cards they have on their battlefield, and then, how many permanents they have on their battlefield, and then how many cards they have in their hand. Just because that's really easy. If somebody's fanning out half of their deck in their hand, probably should be worried about it. And then if they have a bunch of permanents, whether it's creatures or an engine going where they're getting that incremental advantage,
Right.
then I usually try to call it out and say in a way that's not like rude, but say you can always say like, are you including that Phyrexian Altar as a combo piece to try and win right now, or is that something that you're just going to try and grind us out with some advantage? Because that is a good it starts a good conversation back and forth between that player as far as whether we should be concerned with them, and then it also allows them a chance to defend themselves so they're not being attacked, and then you have somebody saying, why is everybody attacking me? Like, this person, there's nothing. Like, you can get ahead of that if you have the conversation, when it comes onto the battlefield.
I really agree. Keeping everybody at the table on board with what's happening and its importance is good. You kind of covered a lot of different things, so that I kind of want to like hash out. And the first thing you said was board presence, right? So the more permanents they have on the battlefield, right? If they have a whole bunch of tokens, they've gone super wide, and they've got like 10 or 11 creatures, I think everybody can look at that and say, this person is a problem. If they draw a Crater Hoof or some other overrun effect, they're likely going to win the game on the spot. The same thing is true for like the stacks or the enchantment player. They have a lot of enchantments on the board that is creating recurring advantage. That's going to be a problem. But really the one that I think a lot of people miss is mana advantage, right? So you had mentioned...
that's not what I thought about, yeah.
So whenever you think about a board presence, you do think about the permanents on the board, but you also have to think about actual lands. And this is something that I do in my Henzi deck. I will eventually do a video deck teching my Henzi deck, because we talk about it every week. Oh, yeah, for sure. But the thing that happens a lot is I have very little board presence. So I don't really look scary the way the deck plays. But if you're looking at my land base, you will realize, wow, he has like 11 lands on turn 6. Maybe I should be worried about this guy, because that mana advantage really allows for explosive turns. So you got not just like creatures and enchantments and stuff, but also mana. So you had mentioned like card advantage, right? They have lots of cards.
Yeah.
Right. But if they don't have a lot of mana,
They're not going to play the cards. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got you.
I mean,
I'm
yeah.
following that.
So, when you're looking at two people, knowing that they have the ability to cast their spells and the cards to cast makes them terrifying.
Yeah,
you could imagine, so you can imagine somebody with like, oh, I've got 15 mana, but I've got 2 cards in hand.
Yeah.
Maybe not as big a deal.
I've noticed lately that a lot of people, if that is the case where they have all of that mana and like 2 cards, they're willing to just straight up show the table their hand and be like, I have lands, don't be afraid of me, focus on this person so we can keep playing the game. Mm-hmm. Or so that we don't all immediately lose, which is another way, another tactic, but it's also somewhere, like, you can kind of steer that car sometimes where you can force the table to say, wow, or you can say, hey, that's a lot of mana and a lot of cards in hand, like, we should probably be afraid of him. I mean, you can use that to your advantage with threat assessment to kind of maybe put a little bias at the table.
Yeah, because every player is going to have their own ability to assess the threats at the table. And that really kind of brings up a good point that I want to make sure we talk about today, which is, let's say, for example, somebody at the table is doing scary things. They are kind of going off, so to speak. And Doug over here doesn't seem to care. Not giving any threat. He's like casting spells, killing other people's permanents, and attacking other players. And you're just like, damn it, Doug, what are you doing? Doug might have a reason. So while we are talking about learning to be good threat assessors, we have to understand that we don't have all the information that the opponents do. So they may have information that lets them think, I'm not worried about Doug. Right?
That's true, yeah.
Maybe they have a Teferi's protection, so they're waiting for Doug to go hard. Then they can Teferi's protection on their turn, wipe the board with a board wipe. So they may not be as worried about Doug right now because something in their game plan strategy says that doesn't matter.
And that's a good way to phrase that, because it is important that you realize that when you're getting into those political conversations and you're not steering in a direction of like, you are not intelligent or you are not doing the correct play, because again, you don't have all the information. So doing it in a respectful way and like saying it once is totally fine, but you don't want to lean into it too hard when it's almost forcing them to be like, well, explain yourself. They don't have to. It's a game of Commander.
No.
They can.
They
don't have to show you what their line is. I mean, that's part of the fun, right?
Right. Well, also, if you keep that in your head that you don't have all the information, so there might be some reason that they're doing that, it helps keep you from getting salty or frustrated.
Yes, definitely.
So you can keep having fun, which is the most important part of Commander.
100% agree.
So engines online, I mean, there's been a lot of great talk about what an engine is. But like that is such a hard thing to understand for some players. So identifying an engine in play that is creating some kind of recurring advantage for the player. Can you think of an example?
Yeah, so I do like a little flicker action when it comes to Magic. So a lot of flicker engines will involve having a great card, Soul Herder, or another type of effect of it, where you, like Conjurer's Closet or something like that, where you'll have an ability to go to your instep and just blink a creature. And that ETB is typically associated with some sort of value, whether it's drawing cards, destroying permanents, anything like that, where you get to do that every turn and you're not investing any more resources into that piece of material that you're gathering. Like, it's just on the table until somebody interacts with it. So that's one of my favorites.
Excellent. One of my favorites that I think a lot of people miss is a card like Courser of Kruphix that lets you play lands from the top of your deck.
Oh, yeah.
And a way to manipulate the top of your deck, like a Sylvan Library or Sensei's Divining Top. Those two together end up giving you like a card or two advantage every single turn. And they're really innocuous. Like a Courser of Kruphix is not a scary card. It's a 2/4 enchantment creature. You know, it's not winning any bells or whistles for impacting the board overall, but it does allow you to end up creating a large amount of advantage consistently over every. One of the other things that you want to keep in mind is we mentioned it a little bit with Phyrexian Altar, but are combo pieces. So not everybody is up to speed on what combos are in Magic. None of us know all of them by heart. There are so many. But one of the things I like to do is kind of be aware of what the function of cards are in a person's deck. So if you're looking at a card and it seems pretty innocuous, not a big deal. But if you see a card that appears like, why is that in the deck? It does something really bizarre, like Blasting Station, right?
Yes.
You have a card, right? There's a card. It's like, well, that doesn't seem like a card I'd want in my deck. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't really play that, but it has a weird effect. That should send up alarms that it maybe is a combo. And we'll talk more about like discerning combo pieces later in the podcast.
Yeah, Martin, that's a good point. What about strategies, specifically ones that are stronger against others, or could dictate the playstyle for the table? Like, do you think about those a lot, as far as like maybe if somebody's playing Voltron versus like a lot of dictate effects, or if another player there's a lot of creatures that make commanders that make tokens now that are really small, like the go wide strategies versus I hate them, but the board wide deck or .net decks, like there's a lot of different conversations to be had there where you're probably not going to worry about the other players if a player is playing a strategy that directly counters or is just really strong against the way that you're going to win the game, because they're most likely going to be the ones that are preventing you from winning the game. It's two different ways to think about it. You're either playing to win or playing not to lose, which are two different kind of thought processes.
Yeah, they're opposite sides of the same coin.
Yeah,
so I think I'm following what you're saying. Like, the first example you gave was really good. Like a Voltron strategy versus a deck with lots of edicts, right? Where you're forcing them to sacrifice creatures, or like, the dictate of Erebos lets you, if you stack a creature, everybody else has to stack a creature. These Voltron decks have a very hard time playing against a deck that's stacked with that. So if I'm playing Voltron and you're playing black aristocrats, I'm going to assume that you have ways to do that. And I'm going to try and kill that player first before I would, try and kill somebody that's doing board wipes or something, right? Because a board wipe interacts a little bit, but I have ways to give indestructible, or I have ways to regenerate, or, things like that. So I would definitely keep that in mind. One of the ones that really stands out to me is combo decks. So, a combo deck is often going to be looking at the threat assessment in a very different way. One, a combo player is going to see, okay, well, if somebody's being very aggressive with creatures, I need to pay attention to that. But they're going to be playing under the radar. So combo players very rarely will sit down and play threat after threat after threat. So if they play, creature after creature after creature that's combating, people are going to be like, that's weird. That's not what you're doing as a combo player, right? Usually you're playing, I'm going to draw some cards, I'm going to play some mana advantage, I'm going to deal with some threats, but they really usually look not very scary. So, so those people will look at like random creatures and stuff, not that bad, because they're not going to pull aggro early. Not usually.
Yeah.
Right?
They're just trying to dig for their combo pieces and survive, basically.
Exactly. So they're not going to be all that scared. Most of their resources are going to go towards trying to deal with the board, ignoring them, and get their strategy online. So I think, as a combo player, you're not as worried about those kinds of like straightforward combat-based decks. You're more worried about the blue players at the table. You're worried about
you from comboing,
right, people that are going to be able to counter spell you. And going back to combos, you have combos that are easy to interact with, combos that are harder to interact with. But that gets a little beyond today's conversation. But the basic idea that a combo player is not going to be worried about, pretty much any combat-based deck until it gets to the point that they're actually trying to kill them.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like you were saying, it is a little bit of a camouflage when it comes to board presence of threat. Like maybe they don't have all the permanents in the world, but they have been, looking at 20 cards scrying this entire game. Like, it doesn't always, the combo isn't always the most straightforward to analyze as far as how close they are to winning. So it can be a little sneaky.
So a lot of times if you're on the other side of that coin and you're the non-combo player, and you have a player at the table that has a pretty non-crazy board presence, and they're doing lots of actions like tutoring or drawing cards, you kind of have to think, like, maybe that person didn't mention that they were a combo player during Rule 0, but that's what they're trying to set up, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to keep that in mind, and maybe somebody that doesn't look threatening, you got to be like, actually, this person's a bigger threat.
Yeah,
right?
That's a good point.
So I'm going to have a quote for you here that's going to kind of lead the conversation for a few minutes. Never be... Oh, I hope so. That's the whole point. Never be the threat until you are. It's a quote by Ryan, I think it's Sanyo from Hipsters of the Coast. He recently did an article on threat assessment this year. And the article was a little short, but it had some good meat in it. Particularly, I like this quote, never be the threat until you are. So a lot of players hope for that opening hand of, turn 1, Soul Ring into Mana Rock. This seems great. I'm going to be coming out the gate so fast. Yeah, but you usually lose. Command Zone did a study on it, and they found that if you play a Soul Ring in the first couple turns, you are less likely to win the game. Which means because everybody sees you as the threat. So if you can avoid that and not be the threat until you're ready to deal with those threats, it's super important.
Yeah, a fine line to walk because you wanna be, using the cards that you put in the deck for that mana advantage early because it is beneficial. But if you do it too early, you're gonna draw a lot of if people have interaction, they're gonna use it to you because you look the most threatening at that time.
Right, or they may be attacking you over attacking another player. A lot of times people will just attack whoever has the highest life. Which I think is a very good strategy for keeping everybody involved in the game. But once you know someone's a threat, then you start attacking that person.
Absolutely.
It's a way to mitigate your life loss by trying to not be threatening. So one of the things...
Martin,
go ahead.
Interrupt you there. What turn, if you have a Soul Ring in your starting hand, will you play it?
I want to wait until somebody's ahead of mana than me.
Okay, that's a good rule of thumb. Yeah, I've still been running it out as soon as I have it, but I might start waiting because I do think is a good point that you're better off waiting.
Right. So, if you can turn 1 or turn 2, Rhystic Study or something, then
something big, yeah.
Right, something that's going to give you so much advantage that it's okay if you're the target. I could see that, but realistically, if I have a Soul Ring, I wait until turn 3 or 4 usually to play it. So other people have already played Mana Rocks, it's less scary. Sometimes I'll even say, right on time, I got my Soul Ring.
Like you just drew it, yeah.
Yeah, but I've had it in my hand since the opening of the game, just trying to keep the heat off me. And I found that to be very, very useful. So have you ever heard of the thing where you have a rabbit, and you're driving down the interstate, and you're wanting to get to your destination as fast as you can. And there's a car that's ahead of you that's going pretty fast. But you're going to be like, I think if a cop comes up, they're going to see that guy and pull him over. So I could probably speed up a couple more miles an hour, keep going along without getting the heat from the cops.
I do that.
It's just something people do. But I do that in Magic when I'm playing Commander. I try and progress my board state, but I try and stay behind somebody else at the table.
Dude, that's a really good analogy.
Yeah.
I think that's one of those things that I don't think really hit me until I started, I won my first game of Commander, and I said, why did I win that game? And it's because I didn't do anything, outlandish, but, if you can find that line and kind of, walk really lightly on it, it's crazy how that'll change your win percentage in Commander. Because I do think a lot of people try to win too early. Like the quote was saying, until you're ready to be the threat, don't be a threat. Or until you are. Never be the threat until you are. I like that.
Yeah. That's that. I think if anybody walks away from anything in this podcast, that's probably the most important. That and not judging other people based on their threat assessment since you don't have all the information. Those are two really good nuggets. Yeah, I think so. So another time to play your threats would be whenever you're going to lose the game otherwise. Right? If somebody is progressing their game in such a way that they're going to be able to close the game soon, then you just got to start playing everything you got. You got to pull out all the stops. You don't want to pass turn without using any of your mana, right? Usually, but you still want to not dump your hand on the table if you can avoid it. Save your better threats, so if there's a Wrath, you don't have to worry about them getting Wrathed away, or premium removal spell being thrown around. You don't want your best cards that help you win the game get destroyed.
That's fair.
And then, of course, when you want to deploy your threats when you believe you're going to win, even though everyone's going to be targeting you. Right? So you think, I think I got this game. I'm just I'm going to be as threatening as I can be. I'm going to try and close this game as fast as I can and just start hitting the ground running.
What are those, on that note, Martin, one of the things I think I like to do when I have the ability is say, can I win when it comes back around to my turn? If they don't have the correct interaction, will I win if I run this threat out on my next turn?
So making them have it, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's useful when it comes to like not just sitting back with your cards that maybe look a little threatening in your hand to yourself.
Right.
But
so the prime example of that is I run a Kit Katano deck. I call her Kit Kat. She's the red, green, white, and a colorless for, I think, a 2/4 that comes into play with a 1/1 green-white citizen token, and you can tap 2 creatures during the beginning of combat phase during anybody's turn to give 1 creature goad and +2/+2 and trample. So one of my best cards in that deck that helps me win the game is the what is that cat's name? It's also Naya and a colorless for a 5/4, and then all of your creatures get +1/+0 and trample. Or no, +1/+0 and vigilance if you have 3 creatures, +1/+0. Jetmir. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
we got there.
the card is, I really think, as good as Craterhoof Behemoth.
It's seen some CEDH play.
Yeah, it is insanely powerful
really
for closing
good,
out
yeah.
game. Because if you have 9 creatures, which is relatively easy in a token deck, they all get +3/+0 vigilance, double strike, and trample. So you're going to do insane amounts of damage. I've been able to wipe out
quick
2 or 3 players at once, right? Like, it's pretty easy. But that's a card where I don't play it like, oh, I have 4 mana, I'm going to play my Jetmir, even though I've only got 2 other creatures out. Like, no, you play it like it's a Craterhoof. You wait until it's going to win you the game or start taking out important players.
Yeah, it's the difference between like incremental versus like the all at once value, which can be challenging for newer players.
Yeah, exactly. So, Ben, what do you think you could do to get better at threat assessment in general?
I think there's a lot of different avenues to go about it. I think personally for my own decks, I think playing against a wider variety of players is always really helpful. I know if you play against the same threats every single time, you're not seeing the different avenues, you're not seeing the different combos. Also, having more conversations during the game is really helpful. I think, especially if you're playing pickup, at the LGS, you're not necessarily like, we did have pretty good podcasts on the Rule Zero, but not everybody's having the best Rule Zero. So, actively speaking out what you're thinking can be really helpful. Like, oh, wow, that Phyrexian Altar looks kind of scary. Or, wow, you have 20 cards in your hand. Like, kind of steering that conversation, or even, kind of swatting off when other people say to you, like, hey, you have a lot of mana. Maybe, okay, yeah, but I only have 1 card in hand. Like, there's the more conversations you can have, it's a better threat assessment. And that doesn't always mean that better threat assessment leads to longer games, but it leads to higher quality games, because you're not coming back to the next turn saying, wow, I wish I had done X, Y, and Z to prevent this guy from swinging out and killing me, or preventing some sort of interaction. So the quality of games will definitely increase if every player has better threat assessment at the table. And it always feels better if you know that you're contributing to the game's quality. It just feels good. I don't know. What about you yourself, Martin? How do you think? I know you, being a more experienced Magic player, and having played with you, I know you have great threat assessment. But what do you think is like some of the things that you could do, or that newer players really stumble on?
Well, I think you're right in just playing more Magic helps. And I don't mean that in like jamming more Commander games. I mean any Magic. Any Magic that you can get down and play. If you have Arena and you can log in and just play a couple, just enough to get your free drafts and stuff, and just do that, even that will help you with threat assessment as you see more cards interacting. What ends up leading to winning the game, what you could have done to slow or stop that. It just helps so much. And you said something key. When you're playing Magic and you want to get better, one of the biggest things you do is afterwards you ask yourself, what could I have done? Right? What could I have done that would have made the game winnable did I make any play mistakes? Like, it might not seem like a play mistake, but, using your removal on one thing rather than the other, or, utilizing all of your mana, or whatever the case may be, trying to find those little advantages every time you play a game and think back, what could I have done better? Were there any points that were weak? Even if you win the game, you think, okay,
yeah,
what could I have done to make sure that I didn't lose the game? And in competitive Magic, what a lot of people will do is they will get towards the end of the game, and even though they are winning with dominant force and presence, they slow their gameplay. And the reason why is they're thinking, what can I do to screw this up? I want to make sure I don't screw this up.
Yeah.
So, like, what could my opponent draw that would make me lose this game, and how can I play around those things, right?
Yeah,
and
next level.
If you do that every game, you're really going to be, like, maxing out your XP, your experience for that game, versus just playing and not thinking about it. You don't really learn as much if you're not actively thinking about it. I do think so. Another one you mentioned that I really like is asking the table.
Yeah.
So, hey, who's the threat right now? Like, is that a combo piece? You ask that. They should answer honestly. Like, I do not think people should lie. I mean, you could be like, man, I don't know. They could
making a joke is totally fine.
Yeah. But I think outright lying is not something you want to do at a commander table. It's not going to lead to repeat game experiences with those people. They're not going to want to play with you. It's not going to be a pleasant thing. So I think asking the table is always a good idea. Like, who's the threat right now? Is this something that's scary? Because somebody might be like, no, I'm going to remove that on my turn, so no big deal. And then I don't have to spend a resource on that. Right?
Yeah.
So being able to help everybody identify the threats at the table helps you not have to expend all of your resources trying to keep everybody in check. Because no one person can keep the whole table non-threatening. It's just impossible. Like, it's just... Either your deck is such a higher power level, it shouldn't have been playing with that pod in the first place, or you're not going to be able to do that.
You're going to run out of cards, basically.
Yeah.
It is kind of interesting, though, because it is like two experience bars. You have the experience bar of, like, your own personal threat assessment, and then you have your experience bar of, like, how do I gauge the political side of threat assessment. And it's very interesting, because I do think that, like, sitting down at a table fresh, I'm pretty good at, like, being like, okay, I know that this commander is typically the threat. I should be focused on that commander and attacking that player until something else reaches a threshold of, okay, that's a little more concerning than what the Kinnan or, the Thrasios player has developed on board.
Right.
Which is, it's interesting, but it does take, and it's weird because, like, you've been playing for so long, but I'm sure you've had experiences in the last year that you're like, oh, I became better at Magic from that game, and it's kind of cool because you're always advancing.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing about Magic is there's always something to learn. So, yeah it's pretty cool. So, one of the things, let me ask you this, like, if you have a deck that you're having a hard time beating, like, let's say you just consistently are losing every time you sit down to play against my Henzi deck. How do you think you could learn to defeat that deck in particular?
That's a great question. I mean, I think you could always ask the person that you're losing against maybe to take the deck for a test run, or just even look over the deck list and say, okay, where are my interaction points? Where am I missing? Where's the threshold where it's like he's playing this card? That is the moment where I have an ability to interact that reduces his advantage that he's getting out of that engine or whatever have you is ultimately leading to his victory. I don't know. I'm not a huge one on playing other people's decks, but I suppose that could help. I get nervous touching other people's cards.
Yeah, I mean, you could always have a proxy and do it yourself. I mean, you can play on Magic Online, which is a rentable thing where you could do these rental things where it's like free. You get a certain amount of money worth of cards each month. You can take that kind of stuff for a spin. You can watch gameplay.
That's a good one. Gameplay
of that
huge.
Deck. Yeah, so if you can't play all the Magic, watch Magic. Checking out some of these YouTubers that have like games all the time and try and just search like, okay, Henzi gameplay EDH, and something will come up and you might be able to see it, right?
Yeah, we'll plug right there. Martin, who's your favorite gameplay YouTuber to watch on a pretty consistent basis?
Well, the one I really like is the Mudsta, MTG Mudsta.
Yeah, okay, I've seen a few of their videos.
I like Mudstas because they're decent players. They're a similar power level that I like to play at, right? And they are there's a pretty decent wide range of decks they play. But the most important thing is it's pretty truncated. So I can watch a whole game in 15, 20 minutes. He narrates it, so he's talking about the game.
That soothing voice.
That is a very relaxing voice. But for me, it just kind of checks all the boxes. But there is so much good Commander content out there these days. How about you? Who's your favorite?
Oh man, I'm not gonna lie. I do get really excited when Play to Win releases a new video. They usually do a little higher power than what I usually play at, but I really enjoy watching it. And they usually include a lot of their audio for the big interaction decisions, which I find really interesting to listen to.
Yeah.
Maybe it's making me better. I don't know. I've got a lot of room to grow in the CEDH because it's just its own animal.
Well, any competitive Magic, those small incremental advantages are super important. Much more so than in like normal Commander games. Like a small misplay won't be the end of the world, but a small misplay in ordering the stack to interact with somebody could mean you win or lose the game. So it's pretty big. I like Play to Win quite a bit. I don't do a lot of CDH. I still watch their content a lot. It's also relatively quick because that's the nature of CDH. It tends to be a little bit quicker games. But yeah, they're good. Some other good ones, of course, the Command Zone's pretty good, fun. One of the ones I've been getting into lately is MTG Stack, I think is the name.
Oh,
Have you seen those guys?
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know a lot about them. They're kind of like a meme kind of thing. They do a lot of meme content, So it's a little different, not for everybody. But they play a little higher power level than I play, but not quite CEDH. It's more like competitive casual is what they do. And
8s and 9s maybe.
Yeah, but they have a lot of cool... I watch them, and they're very creative, and they're always playing different decks. They're trying out new commanders and new strategies. So when it comes to getting the most exposure to ideas for a new deck, I think they are the number one pick.
That's awesome. And you said it was MTG Stacks?
It's called MTG The Stack.
The Stack, okay. Awesome.
I think... Is that the... Yeah, MTG The Stack, yeah. They got the neon light looking kind of backdrop to their channel. They're like I said, they're a little memey sometimes. They do like meme jokey stuff. And
I love that.
It's not for everybody. I get that.
Yep.
But I was a try-hard memer when I was younger too. So I appreciate it. So other ways you can get better, I think, is not just playing the games and watching gameplay, but learning combos. So a lot of people don't have even some of the basic combos memorized. So knowing when to interact, how to interact, what to kind of set off alarm bells is important. One of the ways that I like to better my understanding of Commander, because I'm still relatively new at Commander despite playing Magic for an eon, is www.commanderspellbook.com.
I've never heard of that one. I usually use the EDH Rec combos. Is that one a lot better than that one?
I like it better. The reason why is it's you can go by color and look at combos. It's very easy to interact with. There's the information's kind of dense in that you can see a lot of stuff on your screen at once and kind of work through and kind of get ideas and cross-reference.
Advanced search looks really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it a little bit better personally. Do you have any websites that you have to use to get better?
I just type in the cards to Google with the EDH Rec combo, but I'll definitely be checking this website out. It looks very the user interface I really like. So
yeah, so
I definitely have to check it out.
If you just look through it for each color, you'll start to see that the same cards come up a lot. So then you can start thinking, oh, this is a potential combo. Anytime I see Phyrexian Altar, I know that I should be, paying attention to that player and what they're doing. Same thing is true for other pieces in there that maybe people aren't as familiar with. Like, did you know Den of the Bugbear is a combo piece?
No, the land?
Yeah, so anytime you see that land, you need to think this is scary. So It's not one. That's why I bring it up, is because it's not a card that most people look at and think combo, right? But
Yeah.
the way it works is it's a red mana land that when it enters the battlefield comes into play tapped unless it's the first 2 lands to be played, right? So first turn, second turn. Comes into play, untap those turns, tapped otherwise. It also you can pay a red and 3 colorless, and it says this land becomes a creature and gains the text when this creature attacks. Put a 1/1 red goblin token tapped and attacking. So the way it works is if you're able to activate that ability twice, 2 goblins get made. So if you can gain infinite red
It just
mana,
gives it the text multiple times. Gotcha.
adds the text. It's not a make it a goblin that has this text. It says make it a goblin and give it this text.
That seems like a mistake almost for how the card is written.
100% it was not intended to be that way.
I won't tell anybody. Okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah. But that's the way it works. So It is what it is. It's most of the Magic combos in history are accidents. It's not like they're like, hey, let's go make these overpowered combos. It's just oopsies, you know? It's impossible for them to keep track of all that stuff.
No, but like you said, knowing those cards is definitely going to help with threat assessment.
Yeah.
It can help, like, even just promote more conversations around those cards to know where to steer your interaction. For sure.
Well, like Blood Artist is one of the cards that I think is in a lot of combos.
Yes.
Because if you have infinite deaths, then you have a damage. But if somebody sees a Blood Artist, a lot of people play them fairly. So if you're looking at your hand and you're trying to figure out how you can win, you're like, well, which of my combo pieces do I play this turn? You usually start with the one that's the most innocuous, which would be like Blood Artist.
Yes.
You know what I mean? If you know
Yes.
Phyrexian Altar as a way to infinitely sack something and make mana, that one is pretty much only used in combos, really. Like, that's what it's for.
On the same flip of
yeah.
that, though, it's if you're seeing the Blood Artist, you're going to have a different reaction to it if you're at 40 health or if you're at 5 health, right?
That's true.
There's a lot of different there are a lot of different factors you have to consider, but Blood Artist is a really good example where it has a lot of different combos, but you do see it fairly. It's one of the few that I think can be both.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's a few out there that are like that. Gravecrawler is another one that kind of fits into that style of Aristocrats combo.
Really?
Right? 'Cause
I don't see a lot of people playing Gravecrawler fairly. I don't play it. I'll be honest, I don't play it fairly.
I think most zombie decks run it.
Maybe that's what it is. Okay.
So if you're a
It's just a
zombie
good
deck,
zombie.
it can be a fair card, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
That makes sense.
something to keep in mind. Yep.
All right. Well, that was a great conversation around some threat assessment and what that can look like in Commander and how we can all improve on it. What do we have for Finance Corner for this week, Martin?
So this week we are looking at some secret layers that are going to be coming out soon in December. There's some pretty spicy ones here that I really like. There's a couple of Transformers that have been spoiled. Three Transformers, one of which is a basic land full art cycle, which are pretty. Not the best in my opinion, but still pretty. Then we have
that one.
I mean, I like
Maybe
it.
thumbs middle. Thumbs middle. Okay.
Thumbs middle. They're really cool art. I like the art. If I could get them for less than $6 a pop, I probably would. But I just find it. There's so many pretty lands out there these days that it's kind of hard to justify buying those.
The price point. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's one of them is called Transformers Roll Out or Rise Up, and it has alternate arts for 6 cards. It's got True Conviction, Dramatic Reversal, Fabricate, Collective Brutality, By Force, and Greater Good. So several of these see a lot of Commander play, right? True Conviction has been played since it was printed. Double Strike and Lifelink is pretty insane. It can be a real win on the spot kind of card. Dramatic Reversal is a combo piece. We were talking about that just a minute ago. You put this on a Isochron Scepter, and you've got
Scepter
some
Reversal.
mana rocks. You can create infinite mana on the spot. Sees a lot of play in some very competitive CEDH decks. Fabricate is a nice artifact tutor. It's worth like $5. Also a decent card.
Kind of fits the Transformers theme too. Kind of cool, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think.
value-wise.
Yeah, and then Greater Good is also another playable Commander card, but it's only worth a couple bucks, so not like a good value include. And Collective Brutality sees some, I think, I mean, I know it's good in cube,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
I feel like they could have chosen some more higher value cards here that would have been on theme with Transformers a little better.
Yeah, I would like that.
I don't know.
That Biforce could have been a Vandal Blast. It's still only a couple dollars, but
Yeah, a gun on Transformers, like that would have, the art would have been sweet. I don't know.
yeah, it definitely feels like a miss. The next one though is pretty dope. It's the Transformers Optimus Prime versus Megatron. So it's kind of weird. If you look at the art, there's like 2 copies of each of these. It doesn't mean you get 2 of the card. It's actually a double-faced card. Even
confusing.
though, yeah, very confusing. And they don't transform. It's just a matter you can put whichever side up you want, depending on your taste. But so Megatron and Optimus Prime are the 2 main characters. Megatron is Blightsteel Colossus, which is an 11/11 trample, infect, and indestructible. And if it be put into the graveyard from anywhere, reveal it and shuffle it into its owner's library instead. This card is $60 for the base copy. It is very, very sought after card in Commander.
Yes. It is player removal.
It is player removal. Very good.
Yeah.
Optimus Prime, on the other hand, is the Darksteel Colossus. And it is an 11/11 trample indestructible that also has the shuffle clause. It was the original one. It was the first one. It's not as good as the Blightsteel because Infect kills a player.
It's the fair one.
It's the very fair. It's still worth like $10 for the base copy of that. And then the next one is the Allspark, which is a doubling cube. And doubling cube is a 2-mana artifact. You pay 3 and tap it. Double the amount of mana of each type that you have in your mana pool. So also, it's worth like $10 or $15. Decent card. Probably needs a good reprint to keep it down, but you know, it's a fun, decent Commander card. See some play. So overall, I think this one's the best of the bunch, just because of Blightsteel Colossus. I mean,
Yeah, that's a pretty.
the other 2
expensive
though are
card.
like $10 each. So
That's fair.
I also really like the art on the Megatron and Optimus Prime one. So it just looks so good.
Yeah, they did a really good job on the lighting for each of those cards. It looks really cool.
Yeah, for sure. I bet you they look dope foil.
Oh my gosh.
People still say dope, right?
Oh, that's definitely a word we still use.
Okay, cool. And the one I'm personally most excited about is the Secret Lair Frank Frazetta, which Frank Frazetta is an awesome, like, classic, like 70s fantasy artist that's very dark. I'm sure some of you who don't know his name will recognize some of his art. The Midnight Reaper reprint here is, in particular, probably one of his most famous arts. He's also known for doing, like, you know, it's all like Conan-ish kind of art.
Gotcha.
And he does a lot of scantily clad women, so I'm sure some people will be upset that there's no scantily clad women in any of these, but
No naked women here, no.
probably for the best. But this one's got Dark Ritual, Midnight Reaper, Seize the Day, Field Marshal, and Temporal Manipulation. What are those values? You see anything in there worth some money to you?
I mean, I know temporal manipulation's at least $10. That extra turn spells are usually pretty high up there. Seize the Day, I want to say, is worth something. I don't know. Those are the only 2 that I know that are really, really good. I mean, Dark Rid is good, but it's been reprinted to the ground, right?
Yeah, so Temporal Manipulation is base copy's like $20. Seize the Day, I think.
Snap.
Yeah. So Seize the Day recently had a reprint in a Secret Lair, like just like last month or 2, and that copy's only at $4. This is definitely better art than that one, so this might have a little bit of a premium on that.
Okay.
And then Midnight Reaper is not a high value card, but this is the first pimp copy of Midnight Reaper, so there's no other copy that's going to be as sought after as this one. So I have a feeling this Reaper's going to be $10 or $15 for this copy. Dark Ritual has had several pimped out copies. Beta, of course, is probably Alpha. Beta is probably the most pimped, but those are like hundreds of dollars. I'm guessing this Dark Ritual is going to be like $5.
It looks pretty. I do like it.
It's cool. Field Marshal's a couple bucks too. I mean, this is art wise, this is a home run. Not a lot value wise, but a decent buy.
I think this would be the only one I'd probably pick up. It does look cool and it's got some useful cards.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely want the Blightsteel, so I'm going to be ordering that one.
That's
We're
fair.
3 for December seems kind of sparse. We didn't have a big November Secret Lair. Other than the very beginning of November, we had the
30th.
30th anniversary countdown kit. So that was like very beginning, first couple days of November. So we didn't really have a lot in November. Last year in November, we had a ton. So we had the Castle Dracula, Fibblethip, Crocodile Jackson's Monsters Menagerie, Far Out Man, Pixel Lands, Heads I Win, Tails You Lose, which people have finally started to get.
Finally.
Yeah, a year later. Secret Lair for the arcane lands and spells and things. And
the Arcane show. I wish I got that one. Arcane is such a
yeah. And there was also, like, in November last year, they had Extra Life, Mischief, and Secret Versary, which was just a lot of different things, right? And I bring this up, though, because there's something special this year. If you order out of the December Secret Lair, you get a special card. You want to tell us about that one?
Yeah, so if you order, is it over 200 or is it 200 and over? That's important clarity here. I'm not sure.
200 and over, I believe.
Okay, I know they'll probably make it so that 3 orders is like 99 or 199, but yes, okay, so 200 and over, you will get this super awesome Scarab God card. It is I don't know if the DJ is official, but it has a DJ little tag in front of its name, so you get the DJ Scarab God. He's on the kind of mixtape, and you've got a bunch of, it looks like kind of zombie hands reaching up like they're at a party, and some confetti in the background. The card looks pretty sweet. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. I don't know. What do you think of the art on it, Martin? It's not my favorite, I'll be honest.
I love it. I think it's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, for sure.
Yeah, it's super ridiculous, and I kind of like super ridiculous stuff. I dig it. I definitely am going to try and get this. That's why I said I was hoping that there's more Secret Lairs, because now
it's suspiciously low for the amount right now.
Yeah, you'd have to order like
multiple copies,
5.
Right?
Yeah, like maybe multiple copies of the Optimus Prime Megatron one and multiple copies of the Frazetta one, which will not do a lot for their value. They'll end up being cheap because everybody will get these extra copies and then try and sell them because they wanted the Scarab God. So Absolutely. I'm hoping they've got like another 5 or 6 Secret Lairs so I can get one of each, and they just haven't been spoiled yet because these are not available yet on the website.
Yes.
So I think these are some good ones.
Do you think that the Scarab God itself, that printing will be a good value for it to encourage people to spend that $200? Do you think that one will be pretty high in price?
Well, let's look at like regular Scarab Gods, right? So you got your Double Masters base print copies 31 on TCG, and then the Hour of Devastation, its first printing, is at $29.85, so like right at $30 also. So I definitely think it'll be worth more than those, right? More than $30. Sure. Your pre-release promo card is probably, a pimped out version, and that's $53. Your base foil copy on your prints are sitting at like $50. So yeah, probably around $30 for the base copy, $50 for the foil coming out the gates. But if not a lot of people order it, then it might end up being worth more than that.
That's a good perspective, yeah.
Yeah, so the Amonkhet Invocation, which is going to be always the Burrito Supreme until they do something else like that, is $311. So it's not going to be worth anywhere near that because its rarity is going to be so much less because people will order to get it. Sure. Investors in particular will order to get it. So I'm guessing coming out the gates, people will price it at $40 or $50 for the regular, $60 or $70 for the foil. And then it'll dip down to probably about the normal price as these cards that you see, $30 and $50 respectively. Definitely worth it. I mean, it's a free throw-in, and an important note is that if you buy $400, then you do get 2 Scarab Gods.
You also get a certificate that says you spent too much money on Secret Lairs for this month. Include that. Yeah.
Don't tell me how to live my life.
No, I mean that's pretty cool. That's nice that they included that as well. That also, just the fact that they have that really strikes me odd that they would only have this many amount for the Secret Lairs. Probably more coming out.
I really think they do, and they're just wanting to build up hype, give like a little bit of time for
slow
each
playing
one.
It. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes we get leaks, but I haven't seen any leaks yet on Reddit. So not sure if that's if we do get them, we'll mention them next time. But I'm pretty excited for it. I I'm looking forward to them. All right, that's about it for this week. Thanks for listening to Cooking with Cardboard. We're the Cardboard Cooks. I'm Martin. He's Ben. You can reach us on Twitter. Ben is cardboard_cooks. I am golem_MTG. And we hope you guys have a great day. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys.